I sat there, alone at a table meant for six, staring at the empty seats around me. The fancy restaurant, all white tablecloths and dim lighting, suddenly felt too big, too silent. It was supposed to be a celebration, my 50th birthday. I'd spent the whole week looking forward to this. The family all together, maybe even Susan surprising me with something special. But there was nothing, no one. I checked my watch. Half an hour had passed since the reservation time. No call, no text. Just my drink slowly losing its chill. A soft clink of glassware from the table next to me snapped me out of it. A couple was laughing, holding hands, their engagement rings sparkling in the low light. I swallowed hard, trying to fight back the knot in my stomach. A waiter, Lucas I think, approached with a folded note in his hand. He leaned in close, lowering his voice. "This is for you," he said, before walking away, his eyes lingering for just a second longer than necessary. I unfolded the paper with trembling fingers. The note was simple. "Check your phones now." I didn't even think. I pulled my phone from my pocket and unlocked it, feeling my heart race. There, on the screen, was a series of photos. Susan, laughing, in the arms of none other than Dan, my brother-in-law, their lips locked in a kiss, deep and knowing. Dan's wrist glinted with the silver of my family's heirloom watch, the one I'd thought was lost months ago. My mind went numb. The phone buzzed in my hand, but I couldn't move, couldn't look away from the images. My hands shook uncontrollably as I dialed my son's number, my stomach heavy with dread. He answered after a few rings, but his voice was distant, flat. "Dad, what's going on?" My throat tightened. "Why aren't you here, son? I thought we were celebrating tonight. Mom said you canceled it." Something about stress. His words hit me like a punch. I didn't know what to say. My own son, lied to by his own mother. The weight of everything, the photos, the lies, the silence, crushed me. And in that moment, I knew. I wasn't just the victim of a cheating wife. I was the fool who had trusted too much. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. My thumb hovered over the screen, and without a second thought, I hit Mike's name in my contacts. The phone rang, but it felt like an eternity before he picked up. His voice came through strained, like he was holding back. "Jake?" "Yeah," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, but it cracked. "I need to talk to you." Sure, what's up?" I swallowed, the bile rising in my throat. "You know what's going on with me, with Susan." My voice broke again, but I pushed through. "What the hell, Mike? You're my best friend." There was a pause, a long one. Then I heard him shift on the other end of the line, like he was looking for something to say. "Jake, man, I don't know what you want me to say." "Really?" I could feel the heat creeping up my neck. "How about the truth?" "I found out everything tonight." "You knew, didn't you?" "Look, Susan called me earlier," Mike said quickly, like he was trying to get ahead of something. "She said you were going through a rough patch, that you needed some space. She asked me not to get involved." I stared at my phone, my hands now trembling with something I couldn't name. "She said what?" My voice dropped low. "She told you I was going through a rough patch? That I needed space?" Mike hesitated, then sighed, almost too quietly. "Yeah, that's what she said. And she didn't want me to add any pressure or whatever." I could feel the anger welling up inside me, thick and ugly. "So, you just took her word for it? You didn't even bother to call me? To check if I was okay?" There was a long silence on the other end. I could almost hear Mike's gears turning, but when he finally spoke, his voice sounded different, unsure. I didn't know what to say, man. She said you were, getting weird lately, acting different." My stomach twisted. "Weird?" I repeated, barely able to get the word out without feeling like I'd been punched. "I've been acting weird? Look, I'm just telling you what she told me," Mike said, his tone defensive now. "She said you weren't yourself." I couldn't take it anymore. I ran a hand over my face, the hot sting of betrayal filling my chest. "So you just believed her? Just like that? You didn't even think to call me? Not once?" Mike didn't respond right away. His silence was its own answer. And that's when it hit me. Mike had heard Susan's lies and swallowed them whole. He didn't even bother to question them. He'd backed away because that was easier than dealing with the truth. My best friend, the guy I'd called when I was going through hell, the one I'd trusted with my life, he had believed I was the problem, and that made him just as guilty. My phone buzzed, snapping me back to the present. I glanced at the screen. A string of missed calls from Susan. The pit in my stomach deepened. I turned my phone face down, ignoring the buzz that followed. "Mike," I said, my voice cold now, like I was saying goodbye. "You should have called. You should have checked on me. But you didn't, and that's not on her anymore. It's on you too." I ended the call without waiting for him to reply, and I flagged down Lucas, the waiter. My throat was dry, but I couldn't stop shaking. "Another drink," I muttered, trying to keep it together. Lucas raised an eyebrow, but nodded, heading back to the bar. I sat there, staring at my phone, my mind racing. The lies, the silence, the way everyone had spun their little stories to protect themselves. It was all too much to take in. My trust in everyone was shattered, like glass breaking all around me. And the worst part was, no one seemed to care. Not Susan, not Mike, not anyone. The weight of the isolation settled on me. I wasn't just alone in that restaurant. I was alone in my whole damn life. I didn't even think about the garage door being open as I pulled into the driveway. My mind was still buzzing with everything that had happened, the chaos of the night spinning in circles. But when I stepped inside, the lights were on. A faint smell of perfume hit me, sharp and sweet, mixing with the stale air of the house. It felt like something was off, like a piece of the world had shifted, and I hadn't even realized it until now. I walked into the living room, and there she was, Susan, sitting on the couch, her face lit by the glow of her phone screen. She didn't even look up when I entered. For a second, I just stood there, the weight of everything pressing on my chest. My hands were clenched at my sides, my mind reeling, but I didn't say anything. I just watched her pretend nothing was wrong. I dropped into the chair across from her, letting the silence drag out. The space between us felt like it had stretched miles, even though we were sitting in the same room. I could hear her breathing, steady and calm, like she didn't even know the storm that was coming. Then she looked up, and I saw the color drain from her face when she saw my phone in my hand, the one with the pictures, the one that showed everything. "Jake," her voice was shaky, and I could see the lie already forming in her head, like she was rehearsing it. This isn't what you think." I could feel the heat rising in my chest. "What is it then?" I managed to get out, though it was barely a whisper. "A misunderstanding? Is that what this is?" She froze. Her eyes darted around, looking for an escape, but there was nowhere to go. I didn't mean for it to happen. It's not what it looks like." I didn't even flinch. I just stared at her, feeling that slow burn crawl up my neck. "How long, Susan?" My voice was thick with the question, but it didn't matter. I already knew. "How long has this been going on?" She hesitated, just for a second, and that was all I needed to hear. Her silence answered everything. Every ounce of trust I'd given her, every quiet moment we'd shared, had been a lie. My mind flashed back to all the times she'd told me I was imagining things, that I was the one with the problem, the times I'd second-guessed myself. "You've been telling me I'm crazy," I said, my voice low, dangerously calm, "that I'm not thinking straight, that I need help. All these years, you've been making me feel like I was the one with the issue." Her face twisted, and I could see the panic in her eyes, but it didn't matter. She was cornered, and there was no way out. "Jake, I'm sorry. It just happened. You don't understand." I almost laughed, but it felt hollow. "No, Susan, I understand perfectly." I was staring at her now, seeing her for what she truly was. "You've been gaslighting me. For years." She opened her mouth to say something, but the words caught in her throat. There was nothing left to say. No more excuses that would make any difference. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. I was done. Done with the lies. Done with the way she had twisted everything to make me feel like I was the problem. All that anger, all that confusion had turned into a quiet, suffocating realization. The person I thought I knew, the woman I thought I was married to, she was gone. The betrayal hit me harder than any punch could. Not just the affair, but everything that led up to it. Everything she'd made me believe about myself. I leaned back in my chair, letting the silence stretch between us. I wasn't going to beg her for answers. The next day, I was still trying to make sense of everything when my phone buzzed. It was a message from Lucas, the waiter from the restaurant. My stomach tightened, unsure of what to expect. He'd written, "I have something important to show you. Can you meet me?" I didn't know what to make of it, but something in my gut told me I had to. So I agreed to meet him at a coffee shop near the restaurant. When I walked in, Lucas was already sitting at a table in the back, looking like he was trying to blend into the shadows. He was wearing the same black uniform from last night, but there was a seriousness in his eyes that I hadn't noticed before. I sat down across from him, and before I could say anything, he slid a manila folder across the table. "I think you need to see this," he said, his voice low. I didn't even hesitate. I opened the folder. There were photos first. Susan and Dan, sitting together at the restaurant, laughing, their bodies leaning toward each other, like they were a part of some secret that only they shared. The images were close, detailed. In some, they were practically touching, exchanging those little glances that you can't fake. But the last one stopped me cold. Dan was wearing my family's heirloom watch, the same one that had gone missing months ago. My chest tightened. That watch had meant everything to me, and now I was seeing it on Dan's wrist, in plain view. Lucas saw the look on my face and leaned in slightly. "I've been watching them for a while," he said quietly. "Noticed how they'd sneak off to quiet corners, spend time alone. At first, I thought it was just a vibe, you know? But then I saw the watch, and I knew. I felt my blood run cold. There was more. Lucas handed me a stack of receipts and timestamps. He pointed to a few, his finger tracing the lines. "Here," he said, "I've been keeping track. They were in the restaurant together, almost every time your family came in. I didn't want to get involved, but when I saw Dan wearing that watch, I knew I had to show you. I scanned the receipts, my heart hammering. This wasn't just an affair. It was a carefully calculated betrayal, with dates and times that lined up perfectly. They had planned this, and all the while, I was the fool, thinking everything was fine. Then, Lucas handed me a phone, its screen already unlocked. He tapped a few times, showing me text messages between Susan and Dan. My eyes widened as I read them. "It's almost time. I'll handle him soon. I know you're ready. We'll make sure everything's in place." My throat went dry. The texts were cold, deliberate. Handle him? Susan had been planning this, planning to get rid of me. She hadn't just been cheating. She had been plotting for who knows how long. I looked up at Lucas, my chest tight. "How did you get these?" He shifted in his seat, uncomfortable now. "I noticed a lot of things," he said, his eyes avoiding mine. "People talk. I started documenting what I saw. Didn't think anyone would notice." He paused. "I didn't want to get involved. But after last night, after seeing you, I couldn't just keep quiet anymore. I didn't know whether to be grateful or disgusted. He was an ally, sure, but he was also the one who had been watching me fall apart, silently observing the slow destruction of my life without doing anything. But now, he was giving me the chance to fight back. I took the folder, feeling its weight in my hands, and nodded. "You've given me the proof I need. You've done more than I could have ever expected." Lucas shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "I don't want to get involved any more than I already have," he said quickly. "I just thought you should know. I don't know what you're going to do with all this, but I couldn't just watch it happen." I let out a breath, trying to keep myself together. I looked at the folder in my hands, at the damning evidence. Susan had gone too far. She had crossed a line that couldn't be erased. I stood up, feeling the weight of the decision ahead of me. "Thanks, Lucas," I said, my voice steady. "You've done enough." He gave me a small nod, and I walked out of the coffee shop, the folder clutched tightly in my hand. The truth was in front of me now, undeniable, and I wasn't going to let it slip away. I stood at the back door, the folder clutched tightly in my hands. The early evening air had a bite to it, the kind that made your breath fog in the coolness, but it didn't matter. My heart was pounding, a drumbeat that drowned out everything else. I'd made my decision. It was time. I dialed Dan's number. My fingers trembled slightly, but I steadied myself, the calm resolve settling in. He picked up after 2 rings. "Yeah?" His voice was casual, like nothing had changed. "Get over here. Now. I need to talk to you." My tone was flat, controlled. There was a slight pause, and then, "What's going on, Jake? You'll see when you get here." I hung up without waiting for a response. A few minutes later, I saw his truck pull into the driveway. He stepped out, his usual easy smile in place, but it faltered when he saw me standing there, arms crossed. His eyes darted to the folder I was holding, the one that could ruin everything. "You wanted to talk?" Dan's voice was nervous, though he tried to cover it up with a chuckle. I didn't say anything at first, just handed him the folder. His hand hovered for a moment before he took it, flicking it open like he was trying to find a way to make sense of what was inside. His face went pale as he saw the photos, the receipts, the timestamps. I could see the gears in his head turning, but he wasn't about to admit anything yet. "This isn't," Dan started, his voice rising a little too quickly. "I don't know what you think this is, but you're wrong. I didn't let him finish. Stop. Don't even try to lie, Dan. I leaned forward, my voice cold and steady. I saw the pictures. I saw the texts. I know everything. Dan shifted on his feet, his face reddening. It's not what it looks like, Jake. I laughed, bitter and hollow. It's exactly what it looks like. You've been sleeping with my wife, lying to my face, stealing from me. The words felt like acid in my throat, but I couldn't stop now. You're wearing my family's heirloom watch. That's not just an affair. That's a betrayal. His jaw clenched, and for a second, he looked like he might argue some more. But then the sound of the back door opening interrupted him. Susan walked into the yard, her eyes wide when she saw the tension in the air. She froze, her breath catching when she saw the folder in Dan's hands. She knew. She knew it was over. I turned to face her, and the moment our eyes met, I saw the panic flash across her face. But she didn't try to deny anything. Instead, she opened her mouth, her voice coming out in a rush. Jake, wait, let's talk about this. It's not as bad as it seems. I shook my head, cutting her off. No, Susan, don't even try. I've heard enough of your lies. My voice didn't shake anymore. I was done with all of it. The lies, the gaslighting, the way they'd made me question myself for so long. I want answers, but I'm done with excuses. Susan opened her mouth again, but before she could speak, Dan stepped in, his voice rising. This is ridiculous. You're blowing everything out of proportion, Jake. He turned to Susan, then back to me, his eyes narrowing. You don't know the whole story. I was done listening to him. No, you don't know the whole story. You've been sneaking around lying to me, and now I'm supposed to just stand here and listen to you justify it? I saw Susan flinch at the anger in my voice, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to let either of them off the hook. I've given you everything, I said, taking a step back. But I'm done. I'm done letting you make a fool of me. You can leave. Both of you. My voice was low, but the finality of it hit like a wall. Susan's face crumpled, and she reached out, her hand trembling as she grabbed my arm. Jake, please, we can fix this. We can go to counseling. I jerked away from her, the anger flaring up again. No! You've been lying to me for months. You've been planning this, and you want me to believe you now? I gave her a cold look. There's nothing left to fix. You made your choice. For a second, she looked like she might say something more, but then her shoulders slumped. She knew I was right. She knew there was no way out of this. Get out of my house, I said, each word sharp and final. They stood there for a moment, their silence louder than anything either of them could say. Finally, Dan gave me one last bitter look and walked toward the door. Susan followed, but not before sending me one last desperate glance, her eyes begging me to change my mind. I didn't. I turned my back on them as they walked out, the weight of their betrayal settling into my bones. The moment they were gone, the house felt quieter, emptier, but for the first time in a long while, I felt like I could breathe again. The power was mine now. I was no longer the one being controlled. After they left, I stood in the kitchen, my body still buzzing from the confrontation. There was a strange, quiet satisfaction in the air, but it didn't last. I wasn't done yet. The people who had enabled this, my family, needed to know. They needed to see what their precious Susan and Dan had done, how they'd built a web of lies I'd been caught in for so long. I pulled my phone from my pocket, feeling the weight of the decision settle in my chest. I opened the family group chat, a place I'd always used for birthday wishes and random updates. This time, it was going to be something different. With a few taps, I uploaded everything. The photos, the receipts, the texts between Susan and Dan, even the ones where she talked about getting rid of me for good. I hit send without hesitation. As the message went through, I couldn't help but feel a small flicker of something. Relief, maybe? Or just the cold satisfaction of taking back control. The text sent, I set the phone down on the counter, but it wasn't long before it buzzed. A missed call from Jerry, my father-in-law. He'd be the first to react, I thought. Sure enough, another buzz followed, and then another. I didn't pick up. I wasn't going to let him talk me down or tell me what a mess I was making. I wasn't interested in hearing how Susan and Dan were just having a hard time, or how I should be understanding. I had nothing left to say to any of them. Instead, I grabbed my jacket and stepped out the back door. The cool air hit me hard, sharp and crisp, and I let it fill my lungs. I didn't want to stay in that house anymore. The walls felt too tight, like they were closing in. So, I walked. Not for a long time, just enough to clear my head. With every step I took, I felt the weight of the last few days slowly lifting. It wasn't gone completely, but it was easier to breathe. For the first time in a long time, the silence felt like freedom, not emptiness. I wasn't chasing revenge. That wasn't what this was about. I didn't want to tear down everyone who had ever stood by Susan's lies. But they needed to know the truth. They needed to understand that I wasn't the one who had caused this. I didn't care how they processed it. If they felt guilty or shocked or angry, that was on them, not me. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a string of messages from my brother-in-law, Jerry's wife, and a couple of cousins. They were all asking questions, wanting answers. Is this true? What's going on? But I didn't feel the urge to explain. I wasn't going to pour myself into defending the truth to people who would never believe me in the first place. I silenced my phone and stuffed it back in my pocket. By the time I made it around the block and back to the house, the buzzing had stopped. I didn't know if it would start up again or if they'd give up. Either way, it didn't matter. I was done. I wasn't interested in fixing anything anymore. Not with Susan, not with my family. They had all chosen their sides a long time ago. They had betrayed me, and now they could live with the consequences. I walked inside, feeling a quiet, settled strength in my chest. My life was mine again. It wasn't about fixing what was broken anymore. It was about rebuilding, and I wasn't going to let anyone stand in my way. The weeks that followed felt like a slow, steady shift, like a giant weight being lifted, one small piece at a time. I started closing things down. The joint accounts, the life insurance policies, all of it. The divorce paperwork felt like a formality, but it was still something I had to do. There was no going back after everything. But even in the middle of the mess, I started picking up the pieces of who I was before Susan. I dusted off my old fishing gear and spent afternoons down by the lake, just watching the water, letting the quiet settle into my bones. I started meeting up with friends I hadn't seen in years, people I'd let slip away because I'd been too wrapped up in the life I thought I was building. I felt like I was getting to know myself again, like I was seeing the world with fresh eyes, untangled from all the lies. It wasn't always easy, but it felt real. One evening, Mike called. I hadn't heard from him in a while, but I knew what this was about. He wanted to apologize. He'd been texting too, but I'd ignored those. I wasn't sure if I was ready to hear it, but I didn't have much left to lose. We met at a bar, a low-key place with dim lights and the faint hum of old music in the background, the same spot we'd gone to for years. I walked in, spotted Mike at the bar, and slid onto the stool next to him. He didn't look much different, but his face was a little harder now, like the guilt was starting to catch up with him. "Hey," he said, offering a weak smile. "Hey," I replied, the word hanging in the air between us. We ordered drinks, and for a while, we just sat there, the weight of everything too heavy to ignore. Years of friendship, all those late nights and laughs, felt like they were collapsing into that one moment of silence. Finally, Mike spoke, his voice low. "I know I messed up, Jake. I should have said something sooner. I should have checked on you. I don't know. I didn't want to get caught in the middle, but I should have done more." I didn't look at him right away. I took a slow sip of my drink, letting the words settle in. Part of me wanted to feel angry, but I didn't. I was past that. "You should have," I said, my voice flat. "But you didn't. You stayed silent. You let her spin her story, and I was the one who had to live with it." Mike ran a hand through his hair, looking like he might say something more, but he didn't. I could see the regret in his eyes, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't going to change anything. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Mike," I said, the words heavier than I thought they'd be. "Not yet. Maybe not ever." He nodded, taking it in. He didn't try to argue, didn't ask for anything more. "I get it," he said quietly. The conversation died off, and we spent the next few minutes in silence, each of us lost in our own thoughts. For a moment, it felt like we were still the same, but we weren't. Things had shifted, and there was no going back. After a while, I stood up, tossing a few bills on the bar. "I'm gonna head out," I said, not really looking at Mike. "I need to keep moving forward." Mike didn't try to stop me. "Yeah, I get it, man. Take care of yourself." I left the bar, stepping out into the cool night air. My phone buzzed in my pocket as I walked, but I ignored it. It was probably Mike again, trying to apologize one last time, but it didn't matter. I didn't need his apology. I didn't need anyone's. The only one who owed me anything was myself, and I was finally starting to give that to me. The divorce papers were final. The last pieces of my old life were falling away, and now it was time for a new chapter. A chapter where I was in control, not because I was angry, but because I was free, and that was all that mattered.